Yo, 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 what's up? What's up? What's up? It's your boy, Mr. Never Stop, Never Quit, Repeat, Alan Levi Simmons, and this is season 2 of the Purpose Pod. Yo, episode 1, and I'm so excited to be here today. I have an awesome guest that my buddy Joshua Gould connected me with. I'm so glad that shout out to Josh. Josh, if you're watching, we appreciate you for connecting to like-minded people who are hungry for purpose and hungry to teach others how to find their purpose and to access their purpose, man. Let me tell you guys, I was on the phone with Traci Philips for the first time for like over an hour. It was like an hour, and we neither of us charged each other. It was just free. It was a free, like I'm just funny, but it was an awesome time, man. And let me tell you, she is equipped with wisdom and knowledge and information. I was browsing through her website, looking through her blog, reading everything, and I was just soaking all of her knowledge and wisdom in. And I just know that today is going to be a great day for all of you to be introduced to Traci Philips. So let me get my breath. Let me catch it. Let me catch my breath. So as I said before, Traci Philips, she's a mindset coach. She's an executive. Like, look, listen, there's people out there who have their CEOs who have been through trouble, who've been locked up. They know Traci. I'm telling you, she's the person you want to know. And we're going to dive into that story. And I know y'all just heard like, oh, she talked to people that was locked up. Come on. Yes, people who are in prison have a purpose, but they're just there because of their misfortune. So I'm gonna bring on Traci Philips. What's up, Traci?
Wow, I don't know what to say. I guess like I hope people's expectations are like.
Nah.
How are you, Alan? God, it's so good to see you. It's always good to see
man, it's good to see you. You know, I had to drink some water on that one. You know, I was just so I've been waiting for this for like a couple of weeks now, and it's just so ridiculous. You know.
I know that anticipation. There's like throwing stuff out there. I'm like, oh my God, when is it? How many days? How many days?
Yeah, so I'm just excited to do this, man. But Traci, so we're gonna dive into this because you know I've cut the interviews down from an hour to 30 minutes, but we're gonna try to stick within the 30 minutes. If we go a little over, we go a little over. It's okay. I'm not gonna rush this because I am excited to have you on this show. You know, so to dive into this, like you first told me, like French was the foreign language that you were so dedicated to and you were learning, and you began to learn language, and with that you were able to see inside of people and to see or to hear their language and how they were talking, right? So can you just dive into how was this French, you know, learning helping you with discovering the purpose for other people?
So it's like you make it sound so glamorous. Actually, the real story behind it is and I've always had the ability to read patterns in language. I just didn't know it until later in life. I was always told that it was a troublemaking kind of personality trait, you know, like you're being nosy, you know, why are you questioning? Why are, you know, all that stuff. That we as visionaries get a lot, but in general, no. But when I was in 5th grade, I was in a private school and it was mandatory to take a foreign language at that time.
Yeah.
And so I had to pick between Spanish and French, and everybody was taking Spanish, and you know how we all are. Everybody goes one way, we go the other, right? So everybody's taking Spanish. I decided to take French, and I was the worst one in the class. I struggled so bad. In fact, it was so funny when I went back to my middle school to tell my middle school French teacher that I had gotten a degree to teach French. I thought I was going to give the woman a heart attack. Like she's like, what? I mean, I would be the last person any foreign language teacher would have thought would ever end up teaching other people because it was so bad. What I did well was mimic. And I think that's, again, to the listening, to the mirroring, to being able to read people and really get them at a depth. You know, I was really good at looking French, sounding French, but I couldn't for the life of me remember the you know, vocabulary.
Right.
It's like, just give me a cue card and I'm good. But that, but I persisted, you know, and I think most of us who are made the way we are, we have a challenge in front of us, and you know, that's like a dog with a bone. So, you know, the more that I was challenged in it, the more I wanted to overcome it.
Come on, dog with the bone. And overcoming, like, you know, a lot of people don't have that inside. Well, no, let me stop there, because what you talk about is what's inside of people. And I don't want to say a lot of people don't have that fight inside of them, because I just believe they haven't been coached how to access the fight within. So that's where you come in, and we'll talk about that, guys and girls. We'll talk about that. But so visionaries, you just mentioned visionaries, and a lot of your work is with visionaries. So how did you get into working with visionaries?
Well, I think I've worked with visionaries for quite some time, but it was the beginning of 2020 after we went into quarantine that, as most people, I kind of took a step back and really tried to assess, okay, what's important, now that I had the time to do so, or I was making the time to do so. And one of the things that occurred to me is that, because I've been trying to really focus, and I talk to my clients about this, on niching. And I know different people feel different ways about, really niching yourself in the market. But I really felt that, that was going to be what was going to help me. And I read the book, and it was actually a recommendation from a client of mine who's absolutely visionary. And he said, have you heard of the book Rocket Fuel, which is by Gino Wickman, who developed the EOS system for the entrepreneurial operating system. So for business owners to help them with their internal operations. And he wrote the book Traction, and then later wrote the book Rocket Fuel, which is about visionaries and integrators. And I mean, it was so clear to me. I thought, oh, this is exactly what who I am, but it's also who I'm drawn to and who I help, right? I call myself the visionary of visionaries because I can understand where visionaries are coming from. I can read them so well because we speak the same language, but visionaries need someone to hold their vision for them too, right? Just as, it was, who was it? I always forget his first name, Roger Bannister, who broke the 4-minute mile. He opened the door to so many runners being able to do that. Before that, we thought it was not possible for a human being to do that.
Right.
So, that's what I mean by when a visionary comes forward and is able to see that and be that, then now that's modeled for the rest of the world. That it's like, if one person has done it, then I know that the capacity or the potential for me to do it is there as well. So, yeah, I kind of fell into it by identifying it after the fact, which is what oftentimes happens and what I talk to my clients about when we're trying to, pinpoint and define that innate value within them.
Yeah. And that's powerful, Traci. Like when you just talking about that, like when you see someone break through the barriers that everyone said it was impossible. That's not possible. You're human. It's not possible to write 100 books in your lifetime. It's not possible to speak to 20,000 people or whatever it is. It's not possible to get somewhere without a degree. And I know we talked about that as well, like feeling, unqualified and, and even just like not even believing in ourselves because, well, I don't have the qualifications. And what if I get into this room full of people and all of those people have more experience than me? And that's something that you came into when you started coaching. And I keep leading myself into these things, but I don't want to go there yet. But, you were surrounded with CEOs who, maybe they had higher learning, maybe they've been in the industry longer than you, but you were able to go there and coach them because visionaries need visionaries. And I love what you said right there, Traci. So I love that. And that's so real. And when we were on the phone, you said something and I was writing down a whole bunch of stuff, but you were like, so, what do you, when you walk into a room, like, what do you want people to say, or how do you want people to respond? Is that something that, a visionary needs to ask themselves?
Well, I think it's a great question in general, whether you're visionary or otherwise. I mean, one of the greatest things I loved is, and by the way, man, hats off to DJ Davi, because, I love when you get your favorite songs played, it gets you amped and pumped and stuff. And, so it's like being able to enter a room after some of your favorite tunes are being played. It really focuses you in because, again, music is a language and language communicates with us. And, so for me, I always say, I think about it in terms of when I give a talk, I don't necessarily want a standing ovation. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I get one, that's great, but that's not what I'm shooting for. I always say that after I finish speaking, I would rather hear a pin drop because that means that people are taking what I just said and it's thought provoking enough to make them dig in. Yeah. And that's really what I think visionaries, we're here to bring it backwards. Most people talk about bringing it forwards.
Mm-hmm.
We see, sometimes light years ahead, and our job is to try to translate it back. And so, when people can grasp a hold of those concepts, those visions that we have, there's nothing that brings us more fulfillment, because that is our purpose, meeting a value, right? So we have a value. I always say we have a value. We want it to be valuable, but when it's valued, we know that gap has been met, right?
Meeting the gap.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're always looking for gaps, what's missing, what's missing. We're here to solve, the problems of the world. We're here to solve the gaps. I always like these words like gap as opposed to problem, but that's, we look through a lens. I mean, many visionaries have been told, when is it going to be good enough? When you're always going for next. Well, guess what? That's because that's the lens through which we look at the world. We're here to fill gaps. So we're always going to see gaps. It's not that we're not grateful for what we have and that it'll never be good enough. It's that literally that's our purpose on a larger scale than individually we have, obviously, our missions.
And our missions. And we're going to dive into the missions, because I read your blog last night. Like, I texted you at like 9 o'clock and I was like, Tracy, I'm sorry I'm texting you this late, but just read your blog. But and it was awesome. So you talked about missions just now, but filling the gap. Like, let's talk about like people like Steve Jobs. I met Lance Armstrong. I met Robin Williams in Afghanistan, and like we could just list a whole bunch of people in our life, or people that we know that have gone above and beyond the limits, right? And they filled a gap, where people who are hopeless, who did not see a future in acting or singing or whatever it was, they were the first person to do it. And they were like, man, you know what? I can do that. And you mentioned on the phone, I forgot the guy's name, but you said he was born without limbs, right?
Oh yeah. Vidicek is, I think, his last name. I always forget his first name, but yeah, it's Australian. And he was born with no arms and no legs. And if you look at the impact he's made in his life, not only the life he's created for himself, but the impact that he's made, because he's a motivational speaker, especially for those who feel like they really are up against all odds.
Right.
And, I mean, you can imagine, he hops into the room, if you thought you had a problem, suddenly you're like, what I'm looking at's not as bad, right? And so it's perspective, but then he just, he models. And I think that's, again, what we're all here to do ultimately. It's not what we say, it's what we do that everybody pays more attention to. And so, being it, embodying it. And that's really what we're here to do, because when we try to dummy ourselves down, when we try to, condition ourselves into a box, it doesn't work. It just doesn't. And that's probably where my greatest passion in working with visionaries is giving them permission to be visionary. Because, we're the salmon going upstream, and most of the world are the trout going downstream. And so most of our lives, ourselves included, trying to put us into a box.
Right.
And not only are we out of the box people, we're no box people. Like box, like, what's a box? I don't, categorize that way. But in order to belong, we've had to kind of, and so it's a lot of times it's making ourselves smaller, much smaller than we are. And big isn't better. It's simply, it's not a hierarchical kind of thing. It's literally, racehorses. Did I tell you that story about racehorses?
With the racehorse, the thoroughbred,
that was tied up. Yeah, because racehorses have to race. I mean, if you look at all types of horses, just like breeds of dog, they're not all created equally. And thoroughbreds are born to run. They're born to race. And you can pretty much lock up and tether any horse for an extended period of time. And yes, there will be detriments to that. But if you do that to a thoroughbred for too long, they'll literally go crazy, and you'll have to put them down, right? Because that you cannot tether those of us who are born to go and race, right? So race horses and rock stars. And that's why you tend to, throughout history, see them burn out quick, right? So you mentioned Robin Williams, these greats, absolutely brilliant visionaries. And it's not easy to be at that level, right? That level of energy, that level of intensity, that level of just intent, intellectual, complexity. And most people can't keep up with that. And so it can be very challenging. And so if we're also fighting the boxes, in addition to that, it can be difficult. And so again, giving that permission and giving that understanding, because a lot of visionaries, after having a conversation, they're like, oh my gosh, it feels so good. It's like coming home.
like you know me.
you see me. Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
You're right. And I love that. Like, I feel like I don't belong in a box. Like, I'm this very odd, and I say odd in a positive way, because I like being odd. I like being that guy that, I'm really goofy. Like, I like to act. I'm 32, but I have a kid inside. I have the little kid inside of me that still has joy. That's still a visionary. Traci. Like, when you're a child that could dream that, man, maybe I could fly. And then someone invents an airplane, right? Like, maybe I could fly one day. Maybe, and sometimes, Traci, like, maybe the idea is there, and then we need someone to help shape and shift the way we see things, so that the idea that we initially had can then be created into something that can be real, like an airplane. Maybe, a human can't fly physically by themselves, but you can invent something that can fly you, right? So that's visionary 101 right there. Oh my God, I'm getting excited. Sorry. So
yeah, totally. Well, and that's where the integrators come in, right? So it's finding, first, it's being able to define who we are and be able to stand and own that. Be like, yeah, that fits. That when you try on a really good suit jacket, or you get it tailored and you're like, God, that fits perfectly. That's what we can own. It's mine. It's going to fit me perfectly, but it won't fit everybody perfectly. And once we can do that, then we can start to really see our place in the puzzle, right? That piece that we fit into. And so we start to look at, like, okay, if I know my lane is here, if I go out of my lane, now suddenly I'm not so brilliant. So this collaborative understanding of, if I do, and this is where we niche ourselves in life, even if I do this brilliantly, and we've been conditioned away from it. We've been conditioned not to embrace what we're naturally good at, but to work hard to overcome what we're challenged in. And I'm not saying, don't spend time trying to, hone, maybe weak spots, but honestly, when we put all our energy into trying to strengthen our weaknesses, we're wasting our time.
Wow.
We really are wasting energy and time. We really are here to do the innate stuff, the God-given gifts, the stuff we were born with. That's the zone, what I call zone of brilliance. And then of achievement are what I call the earned and learned, right? So these are the things, once we come out of the womb and we go into school and we have life experiences and we get our credentials and, and all these things, that's what we earn. And although we're conditioned to believe that's our value, that's really supportive value. Our true value is what we were born with. And it comes easy, but we've been told it's not valuable unless you work hard for it. It's not worth anything unless you struggle and you sweat, and it's effort. And so we get very confused as to exactly what our identity or our value truly is. And that's true of everyone, not just visionaries.
Right. And that's real right there. I love that, and you talked about the zone of brilliance, right? And when you're talking about the zone of brilliance, I'm seeing like this road, and it's like, oh man, this is what is naturally, like, I can run this road and I know the curves and I know everything and I feel comfortable in it, but I don't see the value in it. So I jump off of this zone of brilliance, and then I go into this place where I start to not see the value in the journey that I'm in. And man, I keep going ahead of myself in my mind, because I read one of your blogs and it was talking about the journey, right? And you were talking about two travelers. And one of the travelers was so fixated on like all the obstacles that was in his way. And the other guy was just kind of like, facing everything as it came so that he could enjoy the journey and his zone of brilliance in that. I'm just kind of adding that on there. But, and so Traci, can you please, you could talk about those two travelers that I just mentioned, but could you dive into zone of brilliance? Because a lot of people, like you said, everyone has a zone of brilliance that you were innately given at birth, right?
Absolutely. And oftentimes it's the very thing that we're most challenged in. Because if we think about something that you've had to work for, to get back. It's not that you've had to work to establish it. You may have to work to redefine it and realign it. So in other words, when we come out of the womb and we're stripped of our innate value and we're told you're not valuable until you produce something valuable, we go out into a conditioned world and we start to look around to see for other people to mirror back to us what's valuable. And we're like, oh, well, I could do that. And so we start to train ourselves again, our learned and earned skills. And then again, we are taught, no, you're supposed to work hard. Actually, if you're working hard, that's good. So we tend to embrace our challenge areas and not our natural abilities, because our natural abilities, as you just said, are too easy, and that's not hard. And so the more, and you just put the right words to it, the more we push that away, the more we forget. We forget what we truly are here to deliver through that value. And then we finally get to some point, whether it's an identity crisis or, something happens where we start to go, wait a minute. Or somebody tells us, like in my case, when I was asked to work at federal prison with some inmates, the woman who put together the program said, I'd love for you to come in and help these men understand their internal communication, how that's affecting their external communication and then their outcomes, because you read patterns in language. And I looked at her and said, what?
Right.
And she was the one that started, because she had worked with me. She had kind of had this experience with me doing it with her as a client. And she figured it out. She's like, it's called language profiling. You listen to someone's language and I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I didn't even know. So then I had to reclaim it. I had to bring it back up and out and say, okay, how do I do that? What is the value of that? So now I start to dive in. And that was really when I first started to identify this thing called innate value, right? So zone of brilliance plus zone of achievement equals zone of impact. And that's our legacy, right? That's what we're here to create and leave behind.
Yeah. I love that. And that amazing story of someone seeing what was inside of you, a visionary seeing what was inside of another visionary. And and like you as a coach, I could see why you would do this. And you're so gifted, and it's natural for you now to give back what somebody else gave to you. She actually coached you into getting into your zone of brilliance. And like I see it in you, and even when I'm talking to you on the phone, and even reading your blogs and just looking at your site, and I'm observing this zone of brilliance. It's excellent. Like I was like, she's an excellent writer. She's she knows what she's talking about, and she sees the value in it. And a lot of people are doing things that they don't even see the value in. They just see the financial success. And maybe that's what happened with a lot of those guys that were in Butner prison. Like they saw the value in the money that they were making, but they did not, like you said, the inward, they did not see the value within. So now their inward, the lack of value that they see in themselves, they now reflect something else in the world, and it's negative, and they're doing things that are not beneficial to the inner person inside. So yeah, I could go on with that, but you got me on that one.
I love that. Thank you. And thank you for acknowledging me in my zone of brilliance. I mean, because I could also spend time, and what's the point in any of us doing this, spending time trying to say, oh yeah, you should see me when I dance, or you should see me when I try to play an instrument, or I am definitely not in a zone of brilliance. But there's no reason to do that. We don't need to humble ourselves purposely. Where we're most humbled is when we step into what we were given to deliver value to the world through. That's the humbling. I mean, when I get off of a client session and a client has had a massive breakthrough and is just really they're relearning who they are. Yeah. I get off the phone sometimes, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so humbled to this work. Like, thank you for putting me in this position, giving me these gifts that I can bestow on others, because, to me, it's oftentimes like a doula, right? Doulas help women birth babies. I feel like I help people birth themselves back to themselves.
Come on, doula.
And it's very fulfilling, because many times I feel like I'm just holding space, and they're identifying and having that ability to see things at a much deeper level, and having that intimate moment with themselves where they really recognize what their true identity is. And I'll tell you, there's very few things that are more beautiful than that.
Yeah. And Traci, I just while you were talking, I was thinking like, what if you never answered the call in a sense? Like, what if you told her, no, I won't go help these guys out? Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, what goes through your mind when you think about that?
I think something else would have happened that would have
Mm-hmm.
brought that bit forward. I mean, that's one of the things that I find when you have those, I call them drop moments,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like when somebody drops you.
Right.
And sometimes the drop moment can feel good, like wee, like being
Mm-hmm.
on a
Roller
ride,
coaster.
amusement
Yeah.
park. And other times drop moments don't feel good at all. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned early on in my career through a big drop moment where a guy told me after a presentation, he approached me before a presentation and said he was thinking he really wanted to work with me. He had looked me up and researched me and talked to people who had worked with me, and he was very impressed and all that. And after my presentation, he basically just walked up, handed me his business card and said, I don't want to work with you. If you want to know why, call me. And he
Wow.
walked away, and that was a drop moment. And after my ego had a field day on the way home, driving, like, who does he think he is? Blah, blah, blah,
Right.
I remember vividly driving into my garage and thinking to myself, well, I can stay self-righteous and
Mm-hmm.
it'll get me nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could lean into this uncomfortable moment and I could learn something. And that man was the one that told me about 8 years ago that he couldn't work with me because he watched me and I wasn't in my heart space. I was
Wow.
operating intellectually, and he needed a
Mm-hmm.
coach that could help. He wanted to bring out the ability to be more open in his life, and he knew that that was about opening his heart. And he says, I saw you and I knew you weren't anywhere near having an open heart, so there was no way you could help me.
Wow.
And I really, it was interesting is when he said it, I didn't know why it was true and I didn't know how it was true. I just knew it was true.
Hmm.
And it was very humbling to be able to lean into that. And so when I got home, my husband's like, well, so how'd the conversation go? And I was like, well, he told me this. And he says, well, what does that mean? I was like, well, I guess I need to go on a heart opening journey. And he's like, well,
Yeah.
what does that mean? I'm like, I have no
I
idea.
don't know.
Because I didn't
I just gotta go.
know. I didn't know
Yeah.
what I didn't know. Right. So here I am at the
Yeah.
beginning of a journey. And at that point, I started to learn that when it gets uncomfortable or when it gets super, super exhilarating, there's going to be
Mm-hmm.
something and you want to pay attention because it will come back around again. But why waste your time? You might as well get it the first time.
Exactly. Exactly, Tracy. Exactly. Because like with that, with college, right? I just graduated in December, but I did that. Thank you. Thank you. I did that like I started in 2011 and I dropped out in like 2013, right? So, when instead of and you know what, Tracy, I was like, man, I am not made out for this. Like this is not for me. And really, if I had it my way, I would have started motivational speaking probably a couple of years ago. But thankfully, I leaned into, my wife speaking to me and saying, hey, you keep kicking yourself in the butt. Why don't you go back to school? Like you keep beating yourself up over this whole thing. Why don't you go back? Right. So thankfully, I leaned into that. And then thankfully, not thankfully, I'm sorry for those who have lost people, because I just lost a friend, Kendall, to COVID. But when COVID happened, it made me lean into this podcast. And so now I'm discovering my zone of brilliance, and I'm discovering my innate abilities that I've always had. I've had the innate ability to talk to people, to comfort people, to inspire people. So when Josh brought you to me, I was inspired again. Like it was like, when someone has the fuel for your wick or whatever, and you're able to spark that match. And you're like, man, now I remember why I started over again, because it's people like you who are in their zone of brilliance who inspire me to be in mine. So once again, thank you again for that.
I love that. Well, I really honor that. And can I just tell you, you just hit on one of the reasons why I work with visionaries is because
Yeah.
I get that, right? You can only, that's what we do for one another. Like we're just
Right.
ramped up and, you get off the phone after you've been with a visionary who's full on, like they've recognized who they are and they want to just, embrace that. Wow. Talk about rocket fuel. Right. And so that, yeah, I appreciate that. But that's what I say. I was like, I'm spoiled now. I can't work with anybody not visionary because like I just get the juice by working with the visionaries.
Right. And I think when we were talking, you mentioned like knowing, you have to know who your audience or who you want to work with, right? Like you want to know who you want to work with. You want to know where. You said like the who and the where, right? And the what. You mentioned that, and it's had me thinking for the longest. It's like, well, you want everybody to be your audience at first. You
Okay.
want to stand on the stage in front of the whole world and speak your poems and sing your song, but then everyone doesn't listen to your genre. Everyone doesn't like the pace of your music. So you have to find those people who do. And when you do, you speak to them with your authentic self, right? So you found your audience, you found your people.
I found my people, and you know what's really interesting is, I mean, you can imagine being a female coach. People are like, oh, you must coach women. I'm like, actually, I do coach women. I coach both men and women, but my
Mhm.
special spot of just like love and passion is working with men, and
Right.
that actually came from working in Butner, you know, kind of accidentally, and these men who had been top achievers, right? So we look at all those success markers that we
Hmm.
call, you know, we kind of, when we think of success, they'd had all of it and they were
Yeah.
not fulfilled and they were incarcerated. And when we really started to unpack that, it was because they had moved so far in their decision making. And remember, we're a culmination of every decision we made up until this moment, right? So
Right.
the life we are in right now is a culmination of all our choices. And so their choices were not out of alignment. And so it got them into a place that was out of alignment with with the experience they wanted from life.
Hmm.
And so when they started to learn that, and we started to talk about things, and they got, you know, they were able to rid their ego and their, you know, the platitudes and all the things that we hide behind to try to look the part, like I was doing when
Hmm.
that guy was like, oh no, I'm not working with her, she's not
Right.
available,
Yeah.
right? Is it's keeping us not only separated from others, because
Hmm.
we're like wearing this mask and I can't see
Hmm.
your face. I can't wait till I can see people's faces out, you know,
Right.
shopping again. But you know, we're wearing these masks, and then we're always afraid, well, if I take off the mask now,
Hmm.
people might not accept me. But if I just start out being who I am, those, to your point, who like that will be drawn to me, and I don't have to worry about being who I'm not.
Right.
Right? I get to just be. I said to my daughter last night, I said, it's not your job to make people comfortable with who you are. It's your job to be you.
Come on.
Right? And that's the most important thing, is whatever that is our discovery. Is who are
Yeah.
you? You know, what
Hmm.
do you have to offer? How do you want to deliver that, and where?
Hmm.
To your point of niche and market and everything, who do you want to serve? And I find I absolutely adore, especially those visionary leaders, those male visionary leaders that have been doing it a certain way. And
Hmm.
because, boy, visionaries have a huge capacity.
Yeah.
Like they do. They have capacity that you read about. I mean, they just keep coming at it, keep coming at it.
Hmm.
But it's an exhaustive way to live.
Yeah. It's true.
And to be able to come to these guys that have been just living the success life from a place of exhaustion, and
Hmm.
give them permission to do it in a way that's innate. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, the ability to see, I mean, it's they're like, oh God, I feel like I just retired. You know,
Right. Right.
it's so different to come from this angle.
Yeah.
And
And
they've
that's
got all the
amazing.
wisdom and experience to back it up.
Right. Because of the decisions they made, you gain wisdom from the decisions you make. And sometimes if you don't listen to the wisdom, your own decisions will make you a fool, to repeat the same things over and over and over again, and I really admire the fact that, you went through with that job, because someone could take a man that's in prison and, let's say he's achieved so much and they're like, well, he ended up there. He can't be so brilliant. He can't be so intelligent, and people can mock a person who hits the bottom, hits rock bottom. And it may not be prison for some people. It may be depression, suicide. It may be you lose your home, you lose your job, you lose your family, and that's your rock bottom. And you don't know how to activate your zone of brilliance because you're no longer inspired. I feel like it is important for people to have people like Traci Philips in their life to activate the inspiration. And once you're inspired, you can then pursue your zone of brilliance. So you've inspired me for sure, Traci. And, I continue to like admire the way you pursue excellence in your work, and it's so awesome. And I want to let the audience know right now, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask your questions. I know Brendan has something in here, but I will get to it in a second because I want to make sure that I'm staying on the course, and I'm loving this conversation. I've looked over here and I was like, man, I sent her like 10 questions and different things that I wanted to talk about within this time restraint, and I'm really like about to be like, all right, now we'll just do the hour, and but I want to try to at least stick to my plan. But I do want to ask another question before we head out of here.
Okay.
Oh man, I don't know if I could just ask one question because we're gonna. So there has to be a part two. I have to do a part two. And man,
I'll be back.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to tap back into this. So I wrote this down. I read, so from your blog, right? We were talking about your blog, and it was like, what does life purpose have to do with leadership and legacy? What does life purpose have to do with leadership and legacy? And your answer at the end was, it has everything to do with it. And I loved it. I had to write it down. I was like, she says it has everything. And in there, you mentioned reason of being. I think in French is raison d'être.
Yeah, raison d'être. Yeah, reason for being.
Oh, I almost did a German. I was d'être.
Yeah.
Russian. That wasn't it. But and then you also mentioned Western ikigai, right? Ikigai.
Yes, and that's so. Ikigai, I think is.
You know how to say it.
Japanese, so I don't speak Japanese.
Right.
So
I thought I had it.
If you're Japanese out there, or if you speak Japanese, we just butchered the language. We're so
we
sorry.
Apologize.
But yeah, it's that model has been around for a very long time. And this is oftentimes what happens. It's kind of like what happened to Tex-Mex. Somebody at some point went to Mexico and loved the food, and then they brought it back, and it became a westernized version that we call Tex-Mex now, which is very little like actual authentic Mexican cuisine. That's kind of what happened with this concept is that they extracted, meaning, I mean, the first Mark Wynn was the first person who kind of talked about it and created this model around it that we use in coaching. But shout out to Andy, my friend Andy, who Kraft, who first mentioned this to me. And when we were in conversation, Andy and I met on LinkedIn as well, and he's a financial guy, and he was like, "Oh, what you just said reminds me of a kagi, what?" I'm afraid to say it now. And this model, and he's like, "Let me send it to you." And I'm a reverent being, and so anytime I'm always curious as to where things come from, and so of course I do research. I don't just take things at face value. I'm like, let me look into it and see, all the different what people say. And I found this article where it's like, that's not really what it means in Japanese. It's just what it's come to mean through the westernized translation. And this model that they keep giving, they keep saying comes from the Japanese culture tradition doesn't. It's a westernized version. But it really helps us get to the core principles of what, again, and what I love about it is it makes us think about what are we naturally good at, right? What are we passionate about? What do we love, right? And also what are we drawn to? Like maybe what are we called to do? In addition to where's the value in the market? What are people willing to pay for?
Right.
And vocation is always about what does the world need? Right. So there's that gap piece again. And it's easy for us who are visionaries because that's kind of first, what does the world need? We're always looking at what the world needs and then working backwards. Yeah. So it's a model that you can plug your own information into. It kind of gives the framework. And we love framework, right? Visionaries love framework because we're all over the place. And in order to keep ourselves grounded, we need framework. And so that's one of the reasons I love it as a tool, but it's simple. And it really gets you to define these things. And then in the middle, where all those areas overlap, is your ikigai. That is your reason for being. So it's where the world, what the world needs, meets with what people will pay for, meets with what you're naturally good at and what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And so it's cool.
So and you highlighted it. I'm glad because I wrote it down. I was like, okay, so where your brilliance where your brilliance and achievement resides, natural and acquired skills, what you love, what the world needs, what is valued by others, and like you said, what people will pay for, right? And so I got to this point here, and it talked about passion, mission, profession, vocation, like you mentioned. And it says how and why we experience, right? So this is where I wanted to talk about actually, because look, this is what hit me. When I was reading this is what made me, I got to this point and I was like, all right, cool. So how and why we experience satisfaction, but a feeling of inutility, right? Delight and usefulness, but no wealth. Oh, come on, Lord. Excitement and gratification, but a sense of insecurity. And then this last part is comfort, but a feeling of emptiness. And I was like, yo, oh my God. Like when you talk about those things, it's like satisfactions, but you don't feel like you're being useful, and delight and usefulness, but no wealth. And I was like, oh, at that part, it was like, yo, there's a whole lot of visionaries out here, Traci, who have all of this potential, right? And I think we talked about potentiators, right? We talked about potentiators on the phone, and people with all of this potential, right? So what should they do? Like, do they just come and talk to you and figure out how they can turn their potential into wealth and profit? Or what is that like for people who have all of this vision, but they're not receiving from their vision?
Absolutely. And, and again, obviously that model isn't just for visionaries. It's for anybody to really core in on what is going to be my best niche. Like, where do I focus myself? But, yeah, it's a great place to start is to contact me and have a phone conversation, because at the very least, you're going to walk away with some resources and maybe some ideas on what to do first. Mm-hmm. But, where I'm usually engaged by clients is if it's a business owner, an entrepreneur, it's usually at stage 2 growth, where they've done a lot of the initial growing, playing all the roles, right? Wearing all the hats. Because like I said, visionaries have a huge capacity, and it's like they can dream up the circus, and then they're like, well, I can see it, so I'm going to play all the roles, because nobody's ever seen this before, and I'm the only one that know how to do this because I'm the one that's creating it. And it's the same thing as with inventors, and
right.
But after a certain level of growth, we can only keep so many beach balls under the water, and they need a team. And that's usually what I get called in, because things are starting to go haywire. There's no internal operations, because visionaries aren't great at organization and creating systems and all that stuff. And we tend to lead from the heart. So maybe we've hired people that are not necessarily the best people for our organization. And there's all sorts of things that are kind of not syncing up. And so what I do is I come in first and have that conversation. You're a visionary if, and they're like, oh, okay. So what does that mean? And then I gradually help them get in their lane and recognize that that's where they're going to do the most good for their company. And likewise, where these other needs are, other people where that's their natural lane need to come in and create a team. And as the visionary, you're going to know who those people are. We're a great read of people. So we're the ones that should be the face of the company. We're the ones that should be working on the high level ideas and accounts. We're the ones that, should be deciding, right, if it's the right fit. And if there's a question, there's people who do that too. They can do all sorts of analysis tests to find out if the right person is for the right seat and the right fit in the company. But that's what I do. I help visionaries, first of all, define their lane, stay in their lane, and then create teams of people around them that allow them to continue to do that, right? Because a potentiated visionary is the only kind of visionary that ever gets anywhere in life. It said most visionaries, unfortunately, especially in history, because it was a lot harder, to make things happen when you didn't have the right integrators around you. Most of them just died with all of their incredible visions still in them. And I actually have a mission not to let that happen. Like, not that I can save every visionary. That's not where I'm coming from. But I am here to be a resource so that visionaries who want to truly do and fulfill themselves in the way, in that mission that they came here for, can at least get as close to that as they possibly can. That is what the world needs from us. And it's really sad to see people not being able to potentiate, and who have just all this amazing value that the world could really benefit from.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're serving your purpose. And like Traci said, guys and gals, like, if you are that person and you know, maybe you don't even call yourself a visionary because you have yet to discover yourself. You have yet to see the value of who you are. And, you know, you're running a business, you're running a company, maybe you're not running anything, you know, and you just need Traci's advice, you know, and, you know, because there's people out here who will have, you know, a large company, who will be a CEO, you know, but they haven't created yet because they have yet to be inspired. And, you know, the reason why I have the Purpose Pod is for people like Traci to come on here and to share their story and to share information with you all to at least excite something within you so that you can say, you know what, I feel like I'm drawn to her. Let me reach out to Traci. So if you are feeling drawn to Traci, please reach out to her because she will get you to where you need to be and she will help enlighten you on your journey. So yeah, Traci. And let me see, Brendan here has something to say. Let's see. He says, wow, it's like looking to a mirror because the same thing you're doing is somewhat similar to me as well, because I want to see self-improvement in people's lives too. And then he says, both of you, Miss Phillips and Alan, it's like looking into a mirror at you guys. All three of us want to help people in our own unique ways. And you know, Brendan, you're right. You know, when you can see people, and you know what, man, Traci. So Traci, purpose and our innate abilities, like when you go beyond like skin color, gender, religion, and demographics, right? When you go to the innate abilities, it connects us like a railroad, like a train, you know, and we're connecting our cargoes to one another because we see the similarities. We're like, I'm a cargo train too. I'm carrying all of this inside of me too. I feel like you get me, right? And so that's you know, that's what Brendan is saying. He's like, I feel like I'm looking in the mirror, and even though he don't look like me, he don't look like you, he feels like he's looking in the mirror, and that right there tells us that we are on the right path because he is getting inspired. He's a young podcaster. And so I'm just glad to see that Brendan is enjoying this because that speaks to me. He's very dedicated, and I'm going to bring him on here because he's working hard to build his dream. So yeah. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hold on. Pastor Speller says, have you ever coached anyone with no vision? Ooh, good question. I like that.
That is, well, you know, I have not coached anybody with no vision. I've spoken to people who are challenged in seeing, you know, who they are and what they're here for. And I think, you know, I mean, visionaries aren't the only ones that have vision. I mean, we all have a certain degree of vision. When we talk about visionaries, it's obviously that far extended vision and the ability to kind of eagle eye things.
Yeah.
But everybody can have a vision. I mean, otherwise, you know, the only people who would be doing vision boards and creating vision statements would be visionaries.
Right.
But yes, it can be challenging. And again, the degree of our experiences, the degree of our conditioning, the degree of our, you know, to which we question ourselves. You know, I think that one of the things that people have spent a lot of time talking about, you know, is this idea of, you know, not feeling validated by the things that we have always been told validate us, right? Imposter syndrome is what they talk about. And saying where people are like, they can't see the value in all their credentials and they start, I think that that's an awakening. And I talk about it in my book. I actually have a book coming out later this year and it's all in that. But, you know, it's that when we start to wake up, we can no longer tell ourselves the same story as we always have. We can no longer say, I don't know. We can no longer say, I don't see. We can no longer say, that's not who I am. We have to step up and go, okay, if that's not it, then how do I define myself? And if I don't want to define myself by my credentials or my achievements, then what do I want to define myself by? Right. And so that starts to allow us to create that vision. One of my favorite exercises is I have it's called the Authentic Life Blueprint, and it's 12 different areas that I have people get really crystal clear on how do you want that to look in your life. You know, who do you want to be surrounded by? What are those people like? How does it feel? What do you do together? What do you do for fun? How much money are you making? What work are you doing? You know, how is that impacting the world? And get really, it's like a written vision board.
Right.
And people can really get into that space because it's all in us. It's just nobody's ever really asked us to tap into it. And yet almost anybody, when asked and given enough of the tools and exercises that help guide them and support them, can do this. Because none of us are walking around with no purpose. And that's why I love the name of your podcast, because it is all about helping people find their purpose, because there is not a person walking on this planet that doesn't have a purpose. Otherwise, if we didn't have a purpose, we wouldn't be here.
Exactly. Traci, girl, I'm about to throw a shoe at you. Get my shoe. God dang it. Got to flip flop. But Traci, you're so right. And I wanted to let you go ahead and highlight your book as well. You just mentioned that you have a book coming out, and we're definitely going to do a part 2, because I have like a whole list of things, the 3 C's, the 3 D's, I just got a whole lot. Oh, you know what? Wait. I have to ask this question, but go ahead and tell us when the book is coming out and like what they can do to get in touch with you. I have the website scrolling across right now. So go ahead.
Yeah, so the book is Looking In. It's to help people, because I've developed kind of a system that I walk my clients through to help them to define their innate value, the way in which they want to deliver that value into the world, and then where they feel that they're here to deliver that. Again, what's that lane? What's their mission? What's their niche? And so I walk people kind of through this, but I talk about it in terms, I talk about stories, my own stories, client stories, why this is important. But, right now I feel more than ever, we're in this kind of chaotic, everything is changing space, which is the best time to recreate ourselves, right? And we don't want to recreate ourselves from the same book that hasn't been working, right? And we want to ideally learn that the reason we are still searching is because we keep looking outside of ourselves for the answers instead of within us, right? So looking in is all about how to do that, because we hear that we're supposed to do that, but very few people give us framework to show us how to do that. And so I basically take the years that I've been coaching and kind of package it, hopefully, into an enjoyable read. But that my whole mission is to make it not only, something you enjoy reading just as a book itself, but also something that is a very important tool that will help you start to define some of these things for yourself and start to build more awareness and start to engage with that awareness more. Once we know something, we have to kind of take it out into the world and try it on and test it out and see what works and see what flops. And then after a while, certain things keep coming to the surface. And those are the things we can own about ourselves. We're like, yeah, that's consistent. Every time I do X or every time I go out and do whatever, I see that about myself. I can own that. That's a part of who I am. So yeah, I'm excited. We're in the editing phase now. So it should be end of summer. It'll be on Amazon. But anybody who wants to kind of follow that, and when it comes out, if they want to know, get on my newsletter. If you go to my website, you can sign up for my newsletter, and all my blogs go out once a month. I don't haze people. I send stuff once a month, so you're not going to get like a gazillion emails from me.
I get a gazillion emails from people.
But yeah,
and it's worth reading.
Sorry, what did you say?
No, I was saying her blogs are worth reading, people. I'm not just saying it because she's on my show. Look, I don't gas anybody up who doesn't, like, I don't need to gas Traci up. Like, I'm just trying to help you guys get this, because I got it. I understand her value. I understand what she's bringing to the table. And that's why I bring people on the show. I bring people on who are valuable, who have value, who see the value within themselves so that they can also inspire other people. Like the guy that came to Traci that was like, wait, I can't have you as my coach right now because you don't even see your own value. You don't even see what's inside of you yet. And I need you to see that. He wanted her as a coach, but he was like, I want you to see the value inside of you first so that you can really help me get there. So when you have people that see themselves, that can see what's inside of themselves, they can then lead you. So that's why Traci is the best fit, because she has now been awoken to who she is and what her values are and how she can help you create a giant legacy, which leads me to my final question, Traci. What do you want your legacy to be?
So I believe that my mission here is to help create a space where people can come home to themselves and truly be the value that they came. And so, I want to leave behind, my mom taught me at a very young age, leave anything any place you engage with better than you found it. And so my legacy is to do that, but specifically in the vein of providing opportunities for people to see their true worth and value. Because once we do that, there's really nothing that can stop us. Once we see what we're worth and the value of that, nothing can hold us back. And I want to see everybody succeed in what they came here for. So that's what I want my legacy to be.
Amen. I love that. That's come on, girl. You're preaching the gospel. The gospel of Traci. The gospel of Traci. Now, come on now. The gospel of Traci.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to somebody last night about that. I said, I oftentimes ask the question when I'm in a pickle. It's like, what would Jesus do? Right. I'm not kidding. Like, I'm like, what would Jesus do? Right. So I think we're all led by certain things. Yeah. And sometimes, faith is, comes from a variety of different places. It can come from religion and come from spirituality. It can come from another person. But I just want to thank you for being here because, you just said something about that guy who told me he couldn't work with me. The way you put it in language is exactly. And I think the more we can read our story that way, the more we can realize that everything that happens to us is really for us. It's to hold us up. It may not always feel good, but it's always to hold us up and create a space for us to be better.
Yeah, that's real. And thank you. That's what, your story, it inspired me because there are so many people that maybe, right at that point in time in my life, it wasn't the best time to start the Purpose Pod. It wasn't the best time to become a motivational speaker. It wasn't the best time to put my poems out to the world because I had yet to see the value inside of myself because I was still struggling with, and as, and even on the road to success, you will still stumble. And like the man in the blog, if you go sign up, Pastor Speller said he just signed up for your newsletter, by the way. But if you sign up for her newsletter, you will get to see her blogs. And even if you go to her website, theinnatecoach.com, you can go and look at the blogs. And like when I was reading the story, I was supposed to be over like 30 minutes ago. It's okay. It's my show. I can do what I want to do. I do what I want. Right. That's right, girl. I do what I want. All right. So anyway, but it was the two travelers, Traci. And, I think about people who are like me, we're on this journey, and man, we face so many downs and we face some heartaches and some pains. We felt suicidal. We felt depressed. We felt like giving up. We did not see the potential inside of us. We did not see the purpose that other people were seeing inside of us. We couldn't even see the greatness that it was existing since birth inside of us. So, we see these difficulties as, well, maybe I'm on the wrong path. Maybe like this thing that I went through, I had a child at 16, or, my dad was killed, or my mom died, my mom left, whatever your situation is. While you're on this journey, it doesn't mean that you don't have a purpose. These are all things that will create the giant inside of you that once you see the greatness inside of you, you will burst out into this world with joy from your pain, joy from your heartache, joy from the suicidal thoughts, joy from feeling overweight, joy for feeling too skinny. Like after you get through all of that and you see the value inside of yourself, you can then go give your vision to other people. You can go give people a vision, and in the Bible it talks about without a vision, the people perish. And I really believe that people like you, people like me, people like Brendan, people like Pastor Speller, like we take our faith, we take our hope, we take the joy, we take our purpose. And once we discover it, we say, hey, you know what? I see this greatness inside of you. Let me help you, see what's inside of you as well. And maybe like my glasses won't make you see, but maybe it will give you, a 15-20 vision, to where now your 10-10, or your 10-20 will go to 15-20, and now you can see a little bit. And once you have a glimpse of hope, a glimpse of faith, a glimpse of power, then you can go out there and be great and be the visionary, and so the executive leadership coach right here, sitting right here on the Purpose Pod with me, Traci Philips. And Traci, I really, once again, appreciate your time. I just filled out a lot of stuff because I'm so inspired. I just can't help it.
Well, you're inspired for sure. And inspiration comes from within. You know, we can light a match outside. You know, what that really does is it's a vibrational, you know, it's a vibrational match to the ignition inside, right? So I light a match out here, and suddenly there's that flame gets lit in you because there's that vibrational match, you know, and so it's within you. So anything we do, you know, what visionaries do best when they help people see is through perspective. Right. And that's what you do. Like, you tell a story. You tell stories in words, you tell stories in music, we tell stories in all different ways. Like, you use poetry, but you also are this incredible dancer, like in time and space, like how you move your body. Like, you tell a story and you show a perspective that then shifts, right? Because again, our stories are through our own perspective lens. And when somebody comes in and offers a different angle and kind of is like, well, look at it from this way, it's like, oh, it looks totally different from that angle. Thank you. I wouldn't have seen that value. So we do have an ability to help people see what we see, and we do it through perspective.
Yeah. And that's a fact. And Traci, I forgot, I had giveaways for people, and it seems that Brendan and Pastor Speller have been talking a lot on here. So I'm just going to voluntarily give them, hold on, let me grab this real quick. Traci, say something inspiring to the people real quick.
Talk to the people. I